And 7, Johannesburg.
And joining us in studio, Mosiri Tsiane is the chairperson of the South African Liberty Forum. Professor Sipho Siep is a political analyst, and Mlondi Mkhize, national spokesperson for the ANC Youth League, will join us in a bit. Gentlemen, good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us. Now, the strategy and tactics doesn't necessarily change with every elective or policy conference. The issues may vary, but essentially there needs to be a working document that everybody buys into. What are the dynamics that make it all very complicated, Professor Siep?
Well, I think like all strategy documents, there are certain questions that you ask. In politics, what you have parties that have an agenda, or what I call a historic mission. And the ANC has defined its historic mission as making sure that there is a liberation of black people and Africans in particular, but also to define what that liberation means. Initially, there was a political liberation which was going to lead to national liberation. But right now we are at a stage where we talk about economic liberation. So that is a historic mission of the ANC. To achieve that, then you have to ask yourselves, what are the forces of change and what are the forces of resistance? So those questions remain. And then you start looking, what are the relative capacities of those forces? Because sometimes you may have the forces of change, but the force of resistance may be bigger and stronger. So making sense of that is very important. This is why the ANC will also talk about the battle of ideas, that we always think that the ruling ideas should be the ideas of the ruling party. But there are times when the ideological hegemony is not located within the ruling party. And the same applies with the economic hegemony, where you find that the economic power is not within the hands of the majority. So those are some of the issues that the ANC must grapple with in terms of trying to fulfill this historic mission.
Yeah, let's test the liberation movement argument in the sense that their strategy is that the trump card still, because if you care to hear what the opposition says, Julius Malema even saying that that's what the ANC is. It's not a party to govern. We hear from the Democratic Alliance, their strategy, or even electioneering machinery, if you will, that highlighted issues around corruption, issues of failure, essentially, around the ANC in the past 23 years. Mosiri.
Yes, I think in general what we have is that you have a criticism from the opposition party, surely based on an individuals, the leaders of the ANC. One would say that you're looking into character of individuals. You've not looked into the policies that are presented for the people of South Africa, particularly the radical economic transformation policies that is there. But above all, what you're looking at is that what has ANC done in terms of service delivery? What has ANC done in terms of infrastructural development? What has ANC done in terms of mining and so forth? All those things you don't talk about. You don't talk about delivery of water, the improved health services. You don't talk about those things. Opposition parties, they don't want to talk about, because the ANC has excelled in that. Anyone else will tell you that pre-1994, South Africa would have been or was in a worse situation than it's ever been. After 1994, things have changed for black individuals or black people in general. The ANC seems to have empowered its people, have provided services. A lot of people are now having an opportunity to go to school.
Are they using that as a counter strategy, though, to the criticism, as opposed to being painted into a corner and being defensive, Professor Siep?
Well, I think there is a remarkable failure in articulating those successes. I think and part of it is also because the ANC is not in control of the means of communication. Most countries, what they do, going back to what are the instruments that they use to propagate your own message. What you find in most of our media is the selling of negativity. What we have not addressed, and what the ANC failed to address, is the whole notion of white supremacy. When Mandela was speaking in the dock during the Riverina trial, one of the things that he put across was that we must defeat white supremacy. And white supremacy is a system and a thought system where black people are made to think that they're second class. That even black people themselves start buying into that. And hence you find that black people spend most of the time putting each other down. So this notion of even not acknowledging the strides that the black government has made is part of the white supremacy. And white supremacy also uses black people to undermine black people. I always explain it in a simpler way, like patriarchy, where women are taught to think that men are the answer. So even when you have a whole congregation of women and 2 men, you can rest assured that when there's elections, those 2 men will be in the leadership. So we suffer from the same thing. So we need to address that. So it is about also cultural liberation, that whose ideas matter. And it also goes to issues of language. We don't use our language because we think that speaking English or speaking a language of the oppressor makes us better people. So that challenge the ANC has packed aside.
Okay, articulating the successes, as you're saying, as a strategy going forward and gaining the necessary confidence as opposed to dealing with internal issues of slates, factionalism, etc. Do you think that the focus is not necessarily where it matters, Mosiri, for the benefit or interest of the party?
Well, in any democracy, we can't exclude that there has to be competition, battle of ideas within the ANC itself about who aligns themselves with that. And we can't in any way try to ignore the fact that you have a white monopoly in control of certain individuals within the very same ANC. That you can't exclude. There are those that you can stand up and say that we do not support a certain program or a charter simply because we don't align ourselves with it, that we see, I mean, in a normal day, you'd have a black person that can stand up and say, I don't agree that black people should be given an increment of 4% in ownership of their own mine. And you wonder, where does this person come from? Who would disagree with this? You would, instead of saying, but we should take it further, instead of 4, make it 6. Instead of 6, make it 12. But that person doesn't do that. Now you would see that within that very same ANC is a battle of ideas. And in that, those that align themselves in the radical economic transformation and those that align themselves with the status quo remaining the same are there. You've got to separate them. So when they go to that policy, you can't deny that fact, that when they go to the elective conference that they held in December, they've got to choose based on the policies that are there, based on an ideologies that's going to take South Africans forward. All of us are looking at that ANC that is going to improve, in particularly on the economic side, that this second transition is all about.
Yes, and they've ignited that appetite that says, you know, things can't remain the same for the majority black people in terms of the exclusion from the economy, means of production and ownership, etc. But as a collective, is there, in your view, at the moment, a buy-in into that transformation policy agenda?
I think the material conditions of black people demand that there will be economic or must be economic transformation. But as Mosiri was indicating, that you do have a biggest challenge that some of our people have become so comfortable and have been co-opted into the structures of oppression that they also become the agents that make that not to happen. So what we have tried to do, we've always been minimalist in our approach, that as long as it's a black person, that means good. But what the white supremacy has discovered is that it is sometimes better to use black people to undermine black progress. So that's why you find even within the ANC, people who stand and when they speak there, you know that they say the things that white people want, they think of black people. Things that they themselves will not say, but they will hire a black person and promote that black person. And what you see even in our own institutions, that we were satisfied with putting black people in key positions. But when you look at the contribution in terms of transformation that those people, black people have made, you find that it is actually zero. So we need to start asking far bigger questions. Simply to say it's not sufficient to have to focus on the color of one's skin. We must also focus on the color of one's politics. And that is the second part that we did not look at.
Yeah, and also how you deal with the backlash or the revolt when it comes to the transformation agenda. You could argue that because of the reshuffle, now we're sitting on junk status. There's GM that pulled out. Things have become pretty tough in the consumer, primarily the poorest of the poor. So what is the strategy then to build the necessary business confidence, to take the country into their confidence and say we have to pull together in this particular trajectory because it is the right thing to do?
See, there's no way in which anybody would have a full confidence in you if you don't have confidence in yourself. We can go all over the world and ask that people must come and invest in South Africa. If we ourselves are a dismantled people, if we ourselves are not having confidence in our own self, it has to start at home first. How do we make sure that you empower the majority of your own people? That should be the start point. How do you make sure that there is a lot of contribution or participation by the majority in their own economy? If we don't do that, nobody else is going to have confidence in our economy. Yes, we cannot ignore our past and the historical impact that the international world has played in us. Remember, we are worse off because we were once colonized. We can't ignore that. And who colonized us are the very same people that we go and ask to come and invest in us. You ask, who are the greatest people that are playing in our mining sectors? Which countries are playing in it? They're not South Africans. They're foreign countries that are participating in that. And these are the countries that you say, I want an extension of participation. They say, no, you can't have more than 4% that you already have in terms of the mining charter. So, to improve ourselves, the same as you have these reports that are saying that in Zimbabwe there is an improvement of the economy in there. The Zimbabweans are now starting to pick up, they're participating in the economy. So for South Africa to succeed, for us to play a role in the international world, we ourselves have to own all that is belong to us, and therefore go out boldly and say, come and share, come and invest further in us.
Yeah, I mean, let's just look at the existing policies where, for example, ministers of small business, Ulindiwe Zulu, that came up with what one would thought it was a very audacious plan to say the big construction companies and the monopolies will be forced to transform and adopt black engineers and other specialized skills, and still they enjoy large government contracts without necessarily transforming, you know. So are we really just dallying around transformation?
We must accept that there was also a failure by the ANC government to be courageous. When you have control of the economy, especially when it comes to issues of purchasing power, the government has not been able to use that. And what has emerged it is at the beginning this year, has been a language of impatience, a language that says from now on, there will never be a major project where black people are not participants. And the direction that has been taken, and it's a directive that says for every major project, there must be at least 30%. Government is in control of that. It didn't have to wait this long. They could have implemented that from day one, but they failed. I think because of the restlessness, the ANC government has really seen that you can no longer postpone.
Let's go to that policy, Professor Sip. In that, yes, you have, it's almost like the Constitution. You have all these wonderful rights, but if you don't have economic power to exercise purchasing a property or land, etc., they really just look good on paper. So with the access to government spend, the 30% is given on condition that you fulfill certain requirements. Public Finance Management Act in terms of capacity, technical ability, whether you can do the job upfront before payment. That is in itself is counterproductive, because yes, there's a policy 30%, but you don't qualify because of lack of experience and other issues.
Well, let me say, the first thing, that the mere fact that you've articulated it, what should be a demand by our people is that there must be an expression of that in terms of budgeting. It is one thing to say 30%, but once you have a budget that is put there, you say, what is the 30% of this budget, and how much of it should be going? So all departments must be judged on that basis. So you then put plans, you put processes, and you also make sure that there's a consequence management where departments fail. Remember how good we've been when we talk about audits. that we want to have clean audits. We push that. So we must also be able to push that the spend must be reflective. And when the government fails, then that government must actually be removed.
Yeah, well, the role of the Director Generals or even the gatekeepers in implementing the very policy that is chasing or encouraging transformation in the economy. How problematic is that, and how can this elective conference, or rather policy conference, ensure that it trickles down or cascades to every single member in every department and municipality?
I think it's important. Remember that when the ANC needs to sell to its electorate come 2019 is that how are you going to do what you have been unable to do in the past 22 years? What policy are you now showing that indeed in this regard you are going to be a different ANC that is now looking at the second transition? So that policy is important. As Prof has indicated, that without an enforcement, particularly from Treasury, then you're going to fail. The policies must be there to ensure that Treasury starts to implement this. Now you need a willpower. You need people, a leader in that. Fortunately, we do have now. And we have confidence in the new minister. Given the past, you could see that there was no will. We can't ignore that what we've seen lately is that there was no will from the former Minister Pravin. What you have now is that you have a person that has the audacity to make the change. ANC must, next week, as he goes to that policy, ensure that it's going to deliver. Because you can't talk all the time radical economic transformation without making it a policy in their policy. They've got to implement it. They've got to come with the policies that direct government that it should implement that. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, but how successful has government been in ensuring that the levers of the state are used to empower black people and businesses as it were done and favored to a minority in the past? Minister Lynn Brown laments the fact that, enterprises and empires were built just based on government tenders. Yet, when black people get into that fray, you are called a tenderpreneur, you are politically astute, or you have a political clout, all sorts of things, but forgetting that this is the multiplier of opportunities in government, and therefore should be biased to working with black people.
Well, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. What we now have, we have a plan, we have a framework, we also have instruments. One of the instruments is budgeting. The second one is about procurement. The third one is about localization. And then the fourth one is about regulation. Then you also have enforcement in terms of destruction of the cartels. So the ANC, at least for the first time, after explaining what radical economic transformation is supposed to look like, they've also said these are the steps, concrete steps. And what we need to do, and this is also what the voters must do, is to ask them, what does it mean on a monthly basis? So people we should make it visible, because if you're not going to measure it, it's not going to happen. So it is very important that now that it has been defined, and if you listen to the president said, we have about 500 billion that can be spent in the next coming 5 years. So what we need to do is to say, how do you cut that 500 billion in about 5 years? And what does it mean concretely every year? And what does it mean concretely every 6 months? And what does it mean concretely every month? Then once you do that, then you'll be making progress. But if you don't do that, if you don't plan it that way, then you are failing, you are planning to fail.
Yeah. Radical economics transformation in light of the Constitution. The President did say that all changes will be done within the preamble of the law. We know that the land issue is very contentious, and that policy at the moment protects those who are currently have the use of the land. So how does it work in the short term if the policy in itself is being protected to achieve radical transformation, Mosiri?
That's the importance of the ANC having gone to their policy conference, to make sure that they amend and they change it. But to add to your earlier question that you asked about how you're going to make sure that there is implementation of change. Remember, the other change that has to happen is the change of the mindsets. that the Africans themselves, particularly South Africans, black in particular, must accept that they themselves are the custodian of the economy of South Africa. To be participant at the periphery is no longer an issue now. And every average black person must see the possibility of becoming a multi-billionaire. The multi-millionaire. That has to be inspiring to them. Want you to participate in all spheres. You can make policies available, and yet you find people are afraid to participate in their own economy. They say they don't have the skills, they're not. We have enough skills, enough education and skills. For the past 22 years, there's been a lot of preparations. Now it is the time is right to really fully participate in their economy. The policies has to guide us, make it possible for black South Africans to participate.
So you must go boldly to the power, at the altar of power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. There's a glimmer of hope when you look at the young people. If you look at what they have been able to achieve at universities, if you were to ask people like us around the statues that reflects our own oppression, most of our people who were leading those universities were very comfortable until young people says, we are not going to allow these offensive structures. And they didn't want to even debate. They removed that. So you have the new generation. It's a generation that was not oppressed. It's a generation that says, if we claim to be free, that freedom must be expressed in material terms.
All right,
and
Professor,
also even the other groupings that are there.
I hate to interrupt you, but that's all the time we have. As always, thanks so much for joining us. That is Mosiri Tsiane, chairperson of the South African Liberty Foundation, joining us in studio. Professor Sipho Seepe, political analyst, and you at home, our most important panelists. Thanks indeed for joining us. We'll take a quick ad break. We'll see you shortly.